Hilchos Taruvis, Siman Test, Sivav, continuing with the topic of Ein Mevatlin Isser Lichatchila. The Mechaber says as follows: Isser Shel Divrayim, Ein Ma'arvin Oisoi Biyadayim, Kedei Levatloi, Yimosakain B'mezid Oser. Aval, Im Nofel Mi'atzmoi, V'ein Beheter Kedei Levatloi, Marbe Olav Umevatloi. So the Mechaber tells us that just like by Isurei De'eraisa, there is an Isser of Mevatlin Isser Lechatchila, that one is not allowed to take an Isser and Mevatel it Biyadayim, and take the Isser and throw it into Heter Levatel. Humadin, by an Isser D'Rabbanan, the same Isser applies, that is Asr Levatel Lechatchila. And if one does that, the Mechaber tells us that the same Kanas applies of Mezid, that if a person does it b'Mezid, he will not be allowed to eat that food, the same as we found by Isurei D'Oraisa. However, the Mechaber finds a kula by Isurei D'Rabbanan, and that's the heter of marbe. That if it's nafal mi'atzmoi, if the Isurei D'Rabbanan falls on its own into the pot of heter, so the Mechaber paskins that one is allowed to marbe of lav levatloi. Using the example, you have a pot of cholent, and in your pot of cholent you had, let's say, 59 kazesim of heter, and you have one kazais of Isser D'Rabbanan. Choose your Isser D'Rabbanan, whatever you would like, and it falls into the pot of cholent. You're like, oh my goodness, the whole cholent is usher. We are doomed. We are not going to have cholent for Shabbos. So the Mechaber paskins, one is allowed to be makel, to throw in an extra few kazesim of heter cholent into the pot, kedei levato the Isser D'Rabbanan. That's the definition of nafal me'atzmo, fall off the shelf, or I put it in by accident. Oh, very good. So the Poskim point out that we're only makel in the case of nafal me'atzmai, but if you put it in, even if it was done b'shoigeg, that would not constitute the kula of marbe. The Ramah tells us, the Ramah paskins neged the Mechaber, he paskins that by an Isser D'Rabbanan we treat it the same as an Isser D'Oraisa. Not only is it Asr Levato B'Yadayim, but it's also Asr of marbe. So that's very straightforward halacha. Few very important principles. So this halacha comes from the Gemara in Beitza. The Gemara in Beitza Daf Dal and Beis discusses the case of Nashru Eitzim Min HaDekel. You have a dekel tree, and a piece of the wood of the dekel tree falls off on Yom Tif. A dekel tree, a piece of wood that falls off from a dekel tree on Yom Tif is Asr Midrabanan to use. It's called Isra Muksa. And you would not be allowed to use that wood as firewood on Yom Tif. You could not even move the wood on Yom Tif. But the Gemara there discusses what happens if the piece of wood, when it falls off the tree, falls into your fire. Now it falls directly into your all the other wood that you have, and you have enough levatel. Or you don't have enough levatel. So the Gemara says you could add on more eitzim in order to mevatel. So that Gemara is the source of the whole concept of marbe. The Gemara tells us that one is allowed to be marbe more wood into the pile of wood that was already there, in order levatel the Isser D'Rabbanan of the muksa of Nishru Min HaDekel, of the wood that fell from the dekel. Now, what's the reason the Gemara is makel? The Gemara itself seems to bring two reasons down. One reason the Gemara brings down is because it's an Isser D'Rabbanan. The other reason the Gemara seems to bring down is because the Isser Hana from Eitzim Min HaDekel is not like every other Isser Hana. Why? The way the Rishonim speak out is because by the Eitzim Min HaDekel, you're only nana from it after it gets burnt. So while it's in existence, you're not being nana from it. The whole idea of firewood is that you're only nana after it's burnt. So the Gemara says, therefore, it's an Isser Kal. What's the Isser? The Isser is Muksa, being nana from Muksa. So it's interesting because it's only after it gets burnt are you being nana. You're not nana from that Muksa itself. You're being nana from the fact that the Muksa is no longer here. So the Shakvatar is a complicated and that's not our purpose to get into that, but the Gemara does seem to present these two ideas. End of the day, what's happening in front of us, the Mechaber Ramah, based on the Rishonim of how they understand the Gemara, is that what was the source of the Kula? So the Mechaber paskins, based on the Rishonim, that understand that the Kula was based on a D'Rabbanan. The Ramah paskins, based on the Rishonim, that understand that the Kula of that Gemara was unique to Eitzim Min HaDekel, because you are nana only after it gets burnt, but generally speaking, by a D'Rabbanan, those Rishonim point out, which is the Rush and the Maram Rubenberg and the Ran, they point out that generally speaking, we are not mekel bichlal by Yisurim, even on the sugya of marbe. Okay, now the Shach points out a very interesting stira in the Mechaber And John, remember a little bit from Hanukkah. So we know by Neres Hanukkah, after Meiser the leftovers, the remnants of oil of the Neres Hanukkah is usher to use. Not only is one not allowed to use the oil while it's burning, we know that everybody knows that it's usher to be nana from the Neres Hanukkah while it's burning, but the Gemara paskins that even after you finish lighting, the shemen shebaner remains usher forever and ever. It's a very unique halacha, derech hagav, but the shemen in the ner is usher forever and ever. Okay, so what are you going to do with it after Hanukkah? So what you're supposed to do with it after Hanukkah, and it happens every single year, if you always have leftover oil, you're supposed to burn it. Literally just put it to the corner, burn it until it's all gone. That's what you're supposed to do with it. Now, what happens? You say, I have an idea. I'm going to use it for my neighbor's Shabbos, right? Oil, what do you use oil for? Hanukkah and Shabbos. So you can't do that because Shabbos, by definition of a neighbor's Shabbos, is to be nana from it. Okay, so you can't do that. But what about, I want to be mevatel it. I want to take this shemen, the little bit of shemen, put it into a lot of other shemen, and mevatel it. You can't do that either. Our Gemara. What happens is the Mechaber. The Mechaber says, what happens in a case where your nearest shemen shebachanukah falls into your other shemen that you have? Just fell in, but it was less than the shira bittul. Can you be marbit? The Mechaber writes, yesh oimrim, it's aser to be marbit. Ad kan the Mechaber. Paskins in Hilchos Chanukah, it's aser l'rabbis. So the Shach and the Taz point out that that's a stira, right? Because Neres Chanukah, it's an Issad Rabbanan. So why is he being machmir when it comes to the Neres Chanukah? They say it's a pella. So the Shach struggles with maybe giving answers here. He says maybe muksa is more chamu, or maybe who knows? He starts giving, but he says he starts figuring. Yeah. Which muksa is more? Oh, because the muksa by Neres Chanukah, the shemen of Neres Chanukah is muksa l'mitzvasai. So he says maybe that type of muksa is more chamer than everything else. The Shach points out, very interesting. Why am I telling you all this? Because he says, the Shach says, if you trace back the psak of that mechaber in Neres Chanukah, it comes from the Maharam Nuremberg. And the Maharam Nuremberg is the opinion of the Ramah. So he says it's not just a stira just in the psak, it's a stira what I call lineage, psak lineage, the idea of psak lineage, and you start tracing back a psak back to the original Rishon. So he says the Ramah is sourced in the Maharam Nuremberg himself. Neged the Mechaber here. The Mechaber Neres Chanukah is sourced in the Maharat Nuremberg. Okay, so anyways, we'll leave it for the Lamdanim to try to figure that one out. The Be'er Heitev is mitzayin to Magen Avram. The Magen Avram says maybe the answer to the Mechaber is because another principle in Yoreh is maybe the Shemen in Neres Chanukah is what's called a davar sheish lo matirin. What does that mean? Anytime you have an Isser, that will eventually become mutter again one day. So it's not batal. It's very important but it comes up in many places, the idea of davar sheish lo matirin. So the Magen Avram says, since you're going to use that shemen in a year from now, it's a davar sheish lo matirin. That's the Magen Avram. But the Be'er Heitev points out, he says, but that doesn't sound like what the Mechaber is saying. The Mechaber seems to be talking about trying to mevatel it in terms of that at shaykh and bittul. So anyway, as I said, we'll have to leave it to Lamdanim to figure it out. Okay.
It doesn't really have matirin anyways, because you still can't have enough of it.
That's another point, right? It's not really davar sheish lo matirin in the classic sense of the word. It's just that you don't have a way to use it now, but it is. So like by Pesach, I speak about davar sheish lo matirin, because after Pesach, the thing will become mutter. But here, it's usher now will be in a year from now, so definitely that's a problem. Okay. Weiter in the Ramah. All right, on this next Ramah, about 15 minutes before Shabbos, I get a WhatsApp message from Yosef Miller, and he says to me, what's the difference between Choyzer v'Neir and Kama Batal? I said to him, it's 15 minutes for Shabbos, but you'll have to wait till Sunday shir. And that's the next Ramah. Isser sheniz batel, shahaya shishin kenegdoi, v'nitoise bo acharkach mina isser harishon, Choyzer v'Neir v'Nesar. Okay, so you had a case where bittul was executed. We had a bittul, everything is saved. We have a heter in front of us. A little bit of Isser falls into the heter. The sheer bittul was satisfied. Shishim, whatever it is. The problem is, now more Isser falls in later on. And if you mitzaref the original Isser that fell in with the new Isser that fell in, you put the two together, you no longer have the sheer bittul. Using an example, I have my cholent pot. I have 60 kazesim of heter. I have one kazayas of Isser falls in. Everything is mutter. We made it. Batal b'shishim. Another kazayas falls in. We now have two kazesim neged 60. It's no longer batal. If either Ramah, we say choyzer v'neir, it wakes up again. Lemafreya.
So that means anything you ate from that mixture in between is also.
No.
Oh, you mean that's interesting. I mean, what's the nafkamina of eating it? Is saying in terms of malchus?
If you eat in between the first size falling in and second size falling in, not over in.
Oh no, right, because right, no, that's true, right, for sure not, because when the time you ate it, it was batal. But the question right now is, nobody's eating. The question is, can I eat the cholent now, going forward? Yeah, okay. So the Ramah says, Loishna min b'minoi, loishna min b'sheino minoi, loishna yavish b'yavesh, loishna noidim minasayim, or loy noidim minasayim. The Ramah says, basically, any distinction you're trying to come up with, don't hold of it. When I say chayz v'neir, I mean chayz v'neir. But Rabbi, what if? No. Rabbi, what if? No. Right? Any type of kula you're trying to come up with, the Ramah seems to be adamant, we hold of chayz v'neir, which means, very simply put, that at any given moment in time, you have to always look at the history of all the isser that fell into the pot, can I get all of the heter that's in the pot, and determine as of now whether we have enough heter to mavata all of the isser. I don't care, says the Ramah, in what sequence it fell in. I don't care who knew about what when. I don't care what type of mixture this is. Doesn't matter. Any type of chiluk you're going to come up with, you're going to go back to your lumdis and try to figure it all out. It doesn't matter. The Ramah says, we're machmir legamre on chayzer v'neir. We always say chayzer v'neir, look at the Ramah. Yeah.
It's not really because of close of an air.
Okay.
It's really because when we say bittul, the item is still there. It's just you don't have the time in the other food.
Okay.
So it's not close of an air.
The language is interesting language of choser v'neir, right? Okay, interesting. Yeah. Now he actually touched upon what I wanted to mention over here. This implies
he's called it as the fabric. Just
Zaytik Gazach, yeah. It's on the side. It's interesting how the Mechaber doesn't talk about it. Maybe in other places he does, or he implies it. I don't know offhand. The Paiskim over here are not mentioning other Mechabers. Okay, let's try to understand what is the Chumrah of Chayzer v'neir. And based on the principles we discussed last week, it makes perfect sense. And actually, Gershon already touched upon it. It's like this, that the first principle to understand is that according to many Paiskim, the Shach especially here, the idea of chayz v'neir mid'oraisa only makes sense by one case and one case only, and that is the case of lach b'lach min b'sheino mino. Okay, let's try to understand why that is. So we know of the chumrah called tam kicker. Tam kicker means that as long the taste becomes aser. We also know that the whole shear of shishim mentioned last week is not some magical shear. Bittul berov, I call it a magical shear. That's a magical halacha in the Torah called bittul berov. It's like a magical thing. Rove, okay. But the sheer shishim doesn't have that same type of magic to it. The basic concept behind shishim is a simple idea of taste. Now, although we did say last week that there are some poskim who say that once you have shishim, it's somewhat of exeres akasav to matter it legamre no matter what. True, but still it's rooted in a very basic concept called taste. If you can taste it, it's usher. If you can't taste it, it's mutter. Simple. We also explained last week that the reason for that has to do with another fundamental principle in Yoreh called nicker. Nicker tells you anything in the entire Hilchos Taruvis, the entire book over here, any kain in Taruvis, if you can recognize the Isser, it's Eino Batal. I don't care what kind of bittul you're working with, if you can recognize it, it's Eino Batal. So the way the Mefarshim explain the concept of Tam Ki'ikr together with Batal B'Shishim is based off the principle of nicker. As long as there's less than shishim, you could detect it. And that's the reason why it's not batal. And once it's beyond shishim, you can no longer detect it, and that's why it's batal. Aleph. Beis, we said, based on that, that's why min b'she'eno mino is a deraisa, and min b'mino is always a derabanan, at least beyond rov. Because once you have rov, it's batal mi'ikra din. Now what? Now you have a problem of, you can still detect it. That's really the concept. So by min b'sheino mino, you can really detect it. So it's eno bato, midaraisa. Min b'mino, you can't detect it, and therefore it's actually bato midaraisa. It's only aser midrabanan up to the case of min b'sheino mino. Simple put. Now, also, another case, bato yavish b'yavish. Yavish b'yavish, we're going to learn in Siman Kuftes that also there's a shear of shishim. Why? Why is a shear of shishim? In fact, it doesn't make sense, midaraisa, because there's no tam of yavish b'yavesh. The only reason we're machmir by yavish b'yavesh is exera, once again. So the way it works is that we're machmir by min, even min b'sheino mino yavish b'yavesh. It's a drabanan, or to the case of bishul. If I have in front of me 60 pieces of basar shchuta, and basar shchuta, fine, and I throw into it chazir, which is min b'sheino mino, it's yavish b'yavish. There's no tam, mikra din is batal. The concern is that I may end up cooking these things together. So therefore, Chazal say, even yavish b'yavish has a shear of shishim, a gzeira atu, that I'm going to mevashal them, biyachad. Min b'minoi yavish b'yavish is a gzeira atu min b'she'eno mino yavish b'yavish, which is a gzeira atu min b'she'eno mino lach b'lach. That's the progression. Background. Now, with that, we understand this halacha partially. So when it comes to the sugya of min b'she'eno mino lach b'lach, although I have bittul, originally I took my cholent, I threw a little chazir into there, accidentally obviously, and it was less than shishim, everything is batul. I now throw in another kazayas of chazir, so now I can taste it, it's once again nicker. So because it's nicker, that's the reason it's ain't no batul. So the concept, this is the way the Shach explains it. The concept of chos of an eir is not some magical concept where like, oh, it's magically like, and really you're saying it, Gershon. It's not like idea like, oh, it's like reinvigorates itself. The language is a bit dramatic for us, right? But the concept is very simple. The concept is you can now taste it. You can now detect it. Since you can detect it, it's eno batul. Ad kan this halacha. So now you're going to ask me, you're going to say, if that's the case, so this halacha doesn't seem to make sense by the case of this, the chumrah rather, of chos v'neir does not make sense by yavish b'yavish entirety. It doesn't make sense by even by min b'sheino mino yavish b'yavish. It doesn't make sense by all these cases. So in fact, so let's go through a few very important kulas. The Gra writes, the very, very lengthy Gain, Bera Gra, Shaloka Darko, meaning this is like the entire day reading this Gain, or the next 3 days of your life reading this Gain. It's a very, very lengthy Gain, and he really goes into the whole topic as when we say Choser V'neir, and when do we say what's called Kama Kama Bato, which is the idea that once something falls in, it becomes Bato, and therefore even if you add the next thing in, each one becomes Bato. Very complicated thing. Taisus and Yavamis states it very clearly. He says it all depends on tam. Taisus and Yavamis, Pei Beis and Beis writes that if you have tam, so then you can't mevatel that because as long as you can detect it, it's nicker. That's what the Taisus writes in Yavamis. So it says the Gain here, Ein Achanami. Right? He wants to say against this Ramah that the chumrah of Chayz V'neir does not apply by the two cases of the Rabbanans. What are those cases? The case of min of yavish b'yavish. Of yavish b'yavish, at least as long as you have rov, he paskins, we are makel. That's because those things are the Rabbanan. There's no the idea of chos v'neir doesn't make so much sense. It's a chumrah on top of a chumrah on top of a chumrah. The Shach seems to say that we even are makel and chos v'neir on the case of bittul b'rov. He says over here, Isser yavish b'yavish min b'mino shenizbatel b'rov. Kishnoda su lo mitzarif le'eser the kaven de midiraisa v'gam de banan chavitre batel imkein kvar nizbatel ve'adra v'nir de gama isser mitzarif. The Shach says that even by yavish b'yavish, there's bittul b'rov. I have 2 and 1. It's batel mikra din. I throw on another isser. Also, we should not say chos v'neir because chos v'neir is only. He's very clear about this. He's adamant. The chumrah of chos v'neir is only a chumrah in tam, and as long as we're not discussing tam, which is every case of yavish b'yavish, we want to say we should be mekel. Now he writes, Halach l'maisa, he says that the Ramah was machmir, he's bato daitoi against the Ramah, but he says behefsed ruba, you can rely on his kula to say kama bato by the case of yavish b'yavish. That's the end of the shachov here. Okay. The Ramah continues, Kazayis Cholov, Shenafel Amayim and his batel, the Echarkoch Nafel Minamayim, the Kadeir Shal Basar, Mutter, Alpha Pish Ein Basar, Shishim Neged Cholov, Sharon his batel, B'mayim, V'chol Kiyotzi V'zeh. The Ramah speaks of a case where you have a big pot of water, let's just make it simple, 60 kazesim of water, and you have 1 kazais of milk, the 1 kazais of milk falls into the 60 kazesim of water, the whole thing becomes batel. Batel makes no meaning at that point. You could, if that water now falls into the into your cholent, so the Ramah paskins that everything is mutter because the milk was already batel in the water. What is the shaila? Is the shaila here, right? The big shaila in this Ramah is what's the shaila of the Ramah. Now the Shach himself is not clear. He first says very important halach. He says that filu chadchila mutter litain mayim l'kedeir shel basar kaven the gvarnis batel. He paskins that you could even l'chadchila do this. So if you have right next to your cholent pot a piece of water, which you And he says, lechatchila, you can now take that water and throw it in. To me, that would have been the chiddush of the Ramah. I would not have guessed that. I would have thought that that's problematic. But the Shach says that the chiddush, he goes weiter, he still says, I'm bothered with what's the chiddush. Right after telling me this kula, that one is allowed to take the water and throw into the cholent pot, he says, what's the chiddush? So he says maybe the chiddush is that we would have thought you don't say bittul by heter v'heter. There's no concept of, when you're trying to, you have heter v'heter to have, you can't say bittul. Okay. Siv Zayin.
He doesn't say to do that.
He says with Torah's chatas klal pehei the ishomrim the filu lechatchila mutar litena mayim lekadei shel basar kevin dekvarnis bato. That's what he writes at the beginning of Sivka and Chavez. Okay. Oh.
Can you put the milk into the water?
Oh no, that you can't do. Sorry, I didn't mean to imply that. No, I meant you can't lechatchila put the milk in the water, but once the milk fell in the water, right, you can lechatchila put the water into the pot.
With the idea that you're going to put it in after
Yeah.
the meat?
That you can't do because you're trying to activate a bittul lechatchila.
You don't know you're going to be putting the milk water in the bus, so you can definitely put the milk in the bus.
Oh, that's true. Right. Yeah. Right.
No,
But
I mean,
you can't like Mirosh plan this whole thing. Hey, let's get a drop of milk into my cholent and let's go for it. Siv Zayin. Im nivla iser muat l'toich kli l'kol kosher. Im darka shel osa kli lishtamish bo b'shefa. Lishtamish bo b'shefa heter muter lishtamish bo lichadchila kevan she'iser muat v'i efsher lavo l'dei nesinas tam ulefigach iser mashu shenivla b'kedera or b'soch kankanim ukiyote behen muter lishtamish bo lichadchila v'afilu b'ben yoimoi lefi she'i efsher lavo l'dei nesinas tam. Pause. Yeah, there's a long sentence here. The Mechaber talks about the following case. So we can read it step by step. Im nivla isra muat l'toich kli. So you have a kli kosher. Sorry, you have a kli kosher, regular pot, and a piece. You have the word basar? I have the word kosher.
I have basar, but I think it's kosher.
Because we're the boyers. Yeah. What do you guys have? You guys, the old guy. We're gonna go with Harris. Yeah, okay. New Shulchan Aruch wins. Sorry. It must be kosher. Kosher makes more sense, Aaron. Yeah, doesn't make so much sense. Okay, so you have a kli kosher. Thank you. Now you know why you couldn't follow, right? And a little piece of the iser falls in, just a piece, like half a gazayas, teeny piece. In darko shel oisa kli lishtamish bo b'shefa heter. This is the type of kli. It's this massive soup pot. Whenever I use it, I always put in 100 kazesim, 1,000 kazesim, whatever it is, a massive soup pot, okay? I never ever use this pot unless I'm making a massive amount of soup. The amount of isser that fell into the walls would almost always be, not almost always, it will always be batel. There will never be a case that I would use my soup pot that there would not be enough heter of soup connected the amount of isser that was absorbed in the walls. So im darko shel oisa kli lishtamish bo b'shefa heter, muter lishtamish bo lechatchila kevan she'isser muat v'efsher lavo l'dei nesinas tam. Since it's impossible to ever use the pot in a way that would constitute an isser, therefore one is allowed to use it lichatchila. Very chiddush of you. Lichatchila, you can use your pot. Ulefikach isser mashu shenivla b'kedera or b'soch kankanim ukiyotze behen muter lishtamish bo lichatchila. So therefore, in a standard case of a pot or a kankan, a big jug, so one would be allowed to use them lichatchila. This is true even by Ben Yomi. Even though Ben Yomo, we know we're going to learn later on the sugyas of Ben Yomo, and even in Basar B'chol we learned about it. A michshel will never occur. Avalim nivla b'klisha darkly shtamish leitim b'davar muat keka'ara ukiyotziba. If you're discussing a type of a kli that you sometimes only put a little bit of food on, like a standard plate is like that, right? A standard plate, you can put a little piece of chicken on, a lot of chicken. There's no exact amount. Then also l'shtamesh afilu b'shefa gzei Hashem l'shtamesh b'davar muat v'yavo l'sinastam. That then the halach is one is not allowed to use that ka'ara bichlal, even if you say I'm going to put in a lot of soup in here. Doesn't make a difference. You, as Xerah Chazal say, you can't use the kli. Now, the kids over here, there are a few very important points. The first thing is one of the most important kulas in Mevatlan Isser L'Chadchila. We should be jumping out of our seats and saying, how does this halacha operate? Isn't there a halacha called Ein Mevatlan Isser L'Chadchila that we just learned about? I mean, I know for sure there's an Isser in here. So how am I allowed, even in the case of Sheva, how will Chazal be Mekel? So over here the place can say because, what? Could be Yesher, maybe because of Yesher, maybe there's some kula over here. Maybe you can kasha the pot, right? Maybe you can't. Maybe talking about kli cheres. Maybe really is a yefsher. But what the poskim say is that the idea is that since you're not, it's a very interesting concept. Since you're not being mischavein in order to be nana from the isser, that's why Chazal are mekel on ein mevatlan isser l'chadchila. And this is a kula we also learned earlier on by the case of the Insuin Pei Dalid. The Shach brought down this kula, comes up in many places, and one of the most important kulas in the modern day kitchens, when you have shilas of bugs and your strawberries, all that, about whether you can lichatchila, what's called, pulverize your strawberries, because even though there might be tolayim in there, you're not trying to mevatel the isser. So therefore Chazal are mekel. Maybe tomorrow we'll just speak that out bekitzer. Okay, thank you very much.